we go. Running great. And what I want to do now is I want to control how much shininess I have on here, right? So you can just turn metallic up a lot and just leave it, right? And just have your metallic available as just a slider. And you notice you could do that with all these material properties. You can just kind of type in numbers here or left-click drag in here to control these sliders, right? But you'll notice that these also have their own little blue dots, or dots, right? So in this case, I can click on the roughness dot, and you'll see this gives you a lot of controls that you can use with it. So we're going to go way up here, and I'm going to find image texture again. There we go. So it creates a texture there, and we could do new again, right? So let's click on new. And 2048 is fine. I'll call this table roughness. Table rough, something like that. Hit OK. There we go. And you'll see now that it's actually got a lot of roughness there. Now, one of the things you might want to double check on is if I go back to shading, you'll notice here's our shader tree, right? And there is the table color. We can click on that and move it. Here's the table rough. We can click on that and move it. And you'll notice that the alpha from this is plugged in there. And I actually don't really like that. I find sometimes it makes the result weird. So remember, what you can always do is you can always, if you go back to the shading menu and you just kind of look at that table material, you'll see there's your table rough texture plugged into your roughness. You can always just kind of unplug this guy or just left-click drag on the color and drag it into your roughness, right? So for whatever reason, when you plug that in from the roughness there, it tries to plug in the alpha. And I mean, technically you could do that, but I find it's just easier to work with through color. So you'll probably want to quickly go back over to your shading menu and just swap those, right? It'll have the alpha plugged in, just kind of left-click drag on the color yellow dot to roughness. And one of the cool things is, particularly if you've ever used like Maya's shader tree, this one's just so much easier to use. Maya's is not terrible to use, and it's based on the same kind of principles. Most packages have some version of a shader tree like this now. But the Blender one is just pretty painless to use, actually. So you might just want to change that for your roughness one for color. So I'm going to go to texture paint. Save that really quick. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take advantage once again of my fill bucket, right? And even my paint mask stuff, right? Although in this case I might just, let's see here, go back to the wrench and the screwdriver. And I'm probably going to want to pick a color. I'm thinking start with black. And let's just, and make sure this is in the paint view here, right? The image editor. Make sure table rough's the one selected. Let's make sure to fill that in. There we go, pretty rough in there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the mask for face. And in this case, this is the one selected. But remember, the select menu, Control-I, invert, and that'll invert that selection. And what I can do is I can pick white. And then I can just click on here for my fill bucket. And you notice how this fill bucket works with any image type you're using, right? Any image type. And so you'd see there, right? I basically just kind of filled in the tabletop. And you notice how now just the legs are metallic, but the tabletop isn't? So the fill bucket with your face mask, super, super cool, right? I've been a big Moto fan for a long time, but I switched to Blender because, one, in pretty much every way they're equal, or in some ways Blender's actually better and it's free. But it's features like this that I just love in Blender, that has got that ability to filter based on a mask, and your fill bucket works with it. So one of the things you'll see is that this roughness map is really just a map, isn't it? Right? It's really just controlling the amount of shininess for metal, right? You can turn metal on, and then it's just saying, well, we're going to have either high shininess or low shininess. So metallic is just making it look more metallic and giving it the more proper metallic, shiny look. But the roughness itself is controlling the amount of shininess, right? And so you can actually have stuff that are very rough or not very rough at all, depending on where you're painting and what you're doing. And so that's kind of one of the big things I want to get you guys to see a little bit today was that. Obviously, if we want to, we could start to use stencil stuff for painting. I'm not sure if I have a stencil that I really want here, but I could always find one in a minute. I'm going to turn, that guy's already off, good. But I just want to make sure you guys see that you can actually paint any map type, right? And one of the biggest things you'll see here too, particularly when we're doing something that's not color, right? When you're doing a color map, something that's plugged into the color channel, what you're really doing is you're just painting exactly the color, right? That's what a color map is. It's a map that really just controls the color that's on the surface, right? Whereas, kind of our emission map is where the glow is at. Color is really just color, right? So if you want parts red, parts blue, parts green, paint that. Pretty much all the other map types, though, even though they're technically color maps, they don't really need to have as much color, right? You can really just focus on them being black and white and gray. Because what you're really doing is you're saying, hey, I want this to either be not rough or rough. I want this to be metallic or not metallic. I want it to glow or not glow. So even though you're painting a color map, technically, because all textures are just color images, right? What you're using the map for isn't color. You're using it to drive another material property, like shininess or metal qualities or glow qualities, right? And depending on what the lightness or the darkness of pixels does, right? So in this case, black is usually off or 0%. White is 100%. Kind of mid-gray is like 50%. Dark gray be 25%, right? So you really just have this kind of color contrast where one color is set to 0, one color is set to 100%, and that's how you paint. And sometimes it's inverted, right? Most of the time it's this way, but sometimes you'll see that it might be reversed, where you might have to, white might be 0, black might be 100. But usually it's black is 0%, white's 100%. Where that gets a little different is bump maps, where you want kind of 0, positive, and negative. And so black is negative 100, white's 100, and then like mid-gray is like 0. A lot of guys, some of my guys from last year remember that for bump maps. And that's still true in Blender. So what I wanted to do really quickly, and I don't think I have much in the way of texture, so I might just go grab a quick internet texture here. Remember, textures.com is one of your safest ways to do it. Create a free account, and then just kind of spend your tokens on the lowest resolution with the free account, and that'll start building you a texture library. I'm going to do, like, say, felt tabletop, or some felt texture. See what that gives me. Yeah, that'll work right there. I think that'll work right there. Yep. Now, oftentimes, if you find stuff Google searching and there's no watermarks, you're probably fairly safe grabbing it. But you're always safest if you actually have an account that specifically says it's royalty-free, like textures.com. So I'm just going to just using this for demonstration purposes. It's always safest to go where you can get stuff like that. In this case, you'll notice that the JPEG is kind of normal. Sometimes you'll see it gets weird because some people do put embed. I feel like embed certain format things that'll scramble it if you download it without permission or something like that. Like I said, safest is always texture.com. I'm just not going to sign in. I'm just doing quick demonstration stuff. Let's call it felt. Save the desktop. There we go. And that'll at least give me something to work with here. And what we can do now is we can easily paint just on this top part here. Now remember, that mask works for any kind of stuff. So if I go to 3 for face mode, I could effectively just kind of grab just these 3 polygons, and I could turn 8 back on, right, for texture paint, 3 for face mode, 8 for texture paint, and I just click that guy on right there, right? It's just that one that says paint mask. And now only I can paint on this. And I can get a good top view here. You could obviously do this in the 2D painting area if you want to as well, but we're fine here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my regular paintbrush right here, draw brush. I'm going to turn the strength pressure off. It's not really going to matter as much because I'm on a mouse, but it's actually a neat feature if you're using a Wacom pen and tablet. But what I want to do also is and I want it 100% strength, so strength maxed out at 100 or 1. I want to go to the texture area here, right? And you see in the texture area, you can go to mapping type, and it has tiled, view plane, stencil. We want stencil, right? So we're going to turn stencil on. So remember, this is just in this texture pull down, mapping. We click on that. It's another pull down, and we can do stencil here. And I'm going to go new, right? And what that's going to do is that's going to create a new texture in here. Now, if I want to, what I could do is I go to the little kind of red checkerboard down here, right? The little red checkerboard. And you'll see that that brings up this texture that I created, and I can go to open. And there's that felt JPEG. So remember that very, very bottom kind of one right there. It's the red checkerboard. That's where you'll see whatever texture you just created in here. And then you could kind of click on that open to open it up. And you notice we can still kind of do our navigation stuff. Trying to remember what the default quick keys for, because I've got my own quick keys set up at home for this now. I'm trying to remember what they are. There we go. So control right mouse button will actually rotate this, right? Right mouse button will move it. And shift right mouse button will scale it, right? So right mouse button moves. Control right mouse button rotates it. And shift right mouse button scales it, right? Now, one of the things you'll notice is that your alt right mouse button for zoom doesn't work anymore default here, right? So you probably would use scroll wheel there. You can actually change these. I'm not going to do that right now for you guys, but you can actually change to have a better navigation thing. Quick key, that's what I have at home. But you'll notice that this does, when we go to texture here, and we pick stencil, and we make sure to kind of load a proper texture in. And you see that's the texture it's using. You see we have this image now, and I could simply just left-click drag to paint this. Now you'll notice that this is actually painting in the metal channel still, right? That's because we really need to make sure that this is set to paint to the proper texture again. So I'm going to go back up to the wrench and screwdriver up there. And you'll notice that you could actually click on table color. So you see that at the very top here, you'll see that you can actually pick the textures you want to paint on. And now you can see I can just properly paint into the color menu here. Paint this in here a little bit. And in this case, I could kind of move this downward, right? And then I could paint a little more there. Move it over here a little bit. Inversely, you could also just right mouse button to kind of move your stencil around, right? Pretty quickly and easily, right? Right mouse button does that. And then you can see I could easily give this kind of a felt top just by a stencil, right? Of course, we can go back into here. We can just kind of turn that texture off. You'll notice, though, if you go to this little kind of empty pull down, it's still there. You just aren't using it as your current stencil option. We can turn this off, and you can see we've got some felt on the top there, some metal here, some color. And you can see how we could easily start to kind of get ourselves, and I'll usually go back to texture here and turn this back to view plane, just so my normal navigation will work. I'll show you at some point where to assign those quick keys, just not today. All right, so that'll be a great place, I think, to stop our whole entire lecture for today, so I'll stop.